ሰላም ጤና ይስጥልኝ የመንጊዜም ሚዲያ ቤተሰቦች የሚያዝያ 3 2017 ዓ.ም የዕለቱ ጉዳይ ፕሮግራማችን ጀምሯል። የአማራ ማህበር በአሜሪካ በአማራ ክልል ከጦርነቱ ጋር ተያይዞ በትምህርት ስርዓቱ ላይ እየደረሰ ያለውን ዘመን ተሻጋሪ ከፍተኛ ጉዳት በሚመለከት ትላንት ያወጣው ሪፖርት ላይ ዛሬ ሚዲያዎችን በመጋበዝ መግለጫ ሰጥቷል። ከማስታወቂያው በኋላ ወደ እናንተ ይቀርባል።
መንጊዜም ሚዲያ
የመንጊዜም ሚዲያ ከንጹሃን ከህሊና እስረኞች በአጠቃላይ በማንነታቸው ከሚጠቁ አካላት ጎን ቆሞ ድምጽ ያለመሰልቸት ስለሚያሰማ ከልብ አመሰግናለሁ። በፓርቲም በትብብሩም ስም አመሰግናለሁ። የበለጠ በርቱ፣ ተጠናከሩ ማለት እፈልጋለሁ። እንደነዚህ አይነት ሚዲያዎችንም ማገዝ አስፈላጊ ነው።
መንጊዜም ሚዲያ
ዛሬ ትልቅ ስራ እኮ ነው የሰራሽው። ላመሰግንሽ እወዳለሁ። ምክንያቱም እኛ ተገናኝተን አናውቅም። አጓ በርቀት ያቀኛል፣ እኔ አጓን በርቀት አውቃለሁ። እንደውም አሁን እዚህ ስንታይ ሰላም አልተባባልንም ነበር አይደል? የሆነ በውስጣችን የሆነ ነገር ስላለ አሁን ዛሬ ተነጋግረናል አይደል? የሆነ ነገር ይፍቃል። ሰው ሲነጋገር በውስጥ ያለው ነገር ቀስ በቀስ እየፋቀ ይሄዳል እና የመድረክ መዘጋጀቱ በጣም ትልቅ ነገር ነው ለማለት ስለፈለኩት ነው።
መንጊዜም ሚዲያ በተቻለን ሁሉ የሁሉም ኢትዮጵያዊ ድምጽ የመሆን ጥረታችን ይቀጥላል። በተቻለ ለመቀጠል ድጋፋቸው ያሻናል። 703 475 6309 የዘልና ካሻፕ ድጋፎትን ሐሳብና አስተያየቶትን የሚያደርሰን የቀጥታ የስልክ መስመራችን ነው። መንጊዜም @gmail.com የኢሜል አድራሻችን ሲሆን የጎፈንድሚ ሊንኩን ጨምሮ ሌሎች የማገዣ መንገዶችን በቪዲዮ ላይ በተያያዘው QR ኮድ እንዲሁም በዩቲዩብ አስተያየት መስጫ በትዊተር እና የፌስቡክ ገጾቻችን ያገኙታል። ስለሚያደርጉልን እገዛ ከወዲሁ እናመሰግናለን። መንጊዜም ኢትዮጵያ።
Members of the media, thank you for joining us today. My name is Teodros Terfe, Chairman of the Amhara Association of America. Give me 1 second. Robel, I'm going to turn over to you in terms of like controlling who comes in and just making sure the right people are coming in. Before we go into our presentation, I want to give an opportunity for the rest of the AAA members to introduce themselves. As I said, my name is Teodros Terfe, Chairman of the Amhara Association of America. Hone, I'll turn it over to you. Next.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. My name is Hone Mandafro. I'm AAA's Advocacy Director. Robel.
Thank you. My name is Robel Alemu, and I serve as AAA's Director of Communications. So I'm very happy to be here with you all today.
So before we go into the meat of the presentation, I just would like to give an overview about the Amhara Association of America, also known as AAA. AAA was established in 2016 to advocate on behalf of the Amhara people. The impetus or the motivation for establishing AAA was really when in 2016, when we saw the protests that happened in Gondar, and then following the peaceful protests that occurred in Bahardar by young Amharas, and the brutal massacre that happened. A few of us got together and felt that we needed to do something. We needed to do something to be the voice for these young people who were brutally massacred for just really peacefully protesting and speaking about Amhara issues. And so we came together and established the Amhara Association of America. And our goal was, to really to break down and this taboo of organizing as Amharas. We wanted the Amhara people to come together, establish institutions, and advocate on behalf of the Amhara people, because we felt that what was really missing for the Amhara people, and the reason why there was a genocide being committed against the Amhara people, the reason why there was political oppression across all of Ethiopia is because the lack of an Amhara institution to representing Amhara interests. And so our goal was to do that and to help establish Amhara organizations across the globe. And we have been doing that. a big part of what we do is advocacy. And what do we mean by advocacy? For us, we have defined, over the years, we have defined advocacy in terms of really being involved and engaged in 5 areas. Number 1 is engaging with Western governments, primarily the United States government. Number 2 is the media, both Amhara and Western media, with a focus on Western media. Number 3 is international institutions, such as the African Union, the United Nations, the IMF, and the World Bank. Number 4 is human rights organizations. We coordinate and partner with many human rights organizations across the globe. And then number 5, think tanks and academia. These are all areas that AAA is actively engaged in to try to make a difference for Amharas. And so what we try to do is take charge of the narrative of Amharas so that the world is aware of what's happening to the Amhara people. Over the years, we have established ourselves as an evidence-based advocacy organization. And the reason and how we came about to do that is by having a staff of human rights investigators on the ground in Ethiopia, investigating human rights atrocities and reporting on those. And then our team here in the diaspora, taking those reports, editing them, and making, doing an analysis and sharing that with Ethiopian stakeholders. And so over the years, I'm proud to say that we have become really the preeminent human rights organization in the diaspora. The focus of today's presentation is really on a report that we just published on Thursday, which is a report on the state of the educational system in the Amhara region. And the reason that we did this is because really it's important that the world knows, the impact that the war on Amhara is having on millions and millions of innocent children. And the hope is that this report will galvanize people to be engaged, to take action so that these children can return to school and have the same dreams as any child would have to grow up to be, and aspire to be a doctor, an engineer, a teacher, and not have to be witnessing a war. With that said, I want to turn it over to my colleagues, Robel and Hona, to go through our findings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ted. Hona, would you like to maybe just briefly recap what Ted said in Amharic?
መጀመሪያ ወደዛ ከመሄድ በፊት አይ ቲንክ አይፎን በሚል የገባውን ሰውን አይደንቲፋይ ብናደርግ
ሆነ መሳይ ነኝ።
ኦኬ እሺ መሳይ እናመሰግናለን ስለመጣ። ቴዎድሮስ በአጭሩ የአማራ ማህበር በአሜሪካ ታሪክና ስራዎችን ነው ያስቀመጠልን። ማህበሩ በ2016 በተለይ ባህር ዳር ላይ በነበረውን ጭፍጨፋ ተከትሎ በተለያዩ አማራ ክልል አካባቢዎች እና በስፋት በኢትዮጵያ የሚደረጉ ሰላማዊ ሰልፎችን በማየት ወጣቶቹ የሚያደርጉትን እንቅስቃሴ ለመደገፍ እና በተለይ በዲያስፖራው ድምፅ ለመሆን የተመሰረተ ድርጅት ነው። ከዛን ጊዜ ጀምሮ በስፋት አድቮኬሲ ላይ አተኩሮ ሲንቀሳቀስ ነበረ። ይህንን ስራ ለማሳካት የሚያግዙንን የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት ምርመራዎችን ጨምሮ በርካታ ስራዎችን እንሰራለን። በእኛ በትርጓሜ አድቮኬሲ ሲባል በአጠቃላይ ስለ አማራው ራሱ እንዲናገር ማስቻል ነው። አማራው ናሬቲቭን ትርክቱን እንዲቆጣጠር ማገዝ ነው። ይህንን ለማድረግ በዚህ ትርክት በመገንባት እና በማሰራጨት ሚና ያላቸውን የመንግስት አካላቶች፣ የዓለም አቀፍ ድርጅቶች፣ ጋዜጠኞች፣ ሰብአዊ መብት ተቋማትና ቲንክ ታንኮች አካባቢ ያሉ ተመራማሪዎችን እነሱ ጋር በማግኘት ያለውን አማራን ጉዳይ በሚመለከቱ የማስተማር እና የአድቮኬሲ የመወትወት ስራ እንሰራለን። We can go next to the next slide.
Okay, thank you so much, Hona. So thank you everyone for joining us for this talk. we're just going to be briefly talking about our latest report in 3 sections. The first being just an introduction, the second being a report summary, just highlighting some key elements of our reporting, and then we're going to conclude with a summary of our findings as well as recommendations that came out of the report. And for those of you who are just joining us, you can find links to the report and the accompanying statements in the Zoom chat for this meeting. And so there's 3 links. The first is just directly to the report. The second is to the statement in English, and the last is the statement in Amharic.
በዛሬው ውይይታችን ወይም በዚህ ገለጻ በሐሙስ ዕለት ያሰጠነውን ወይም ያተምነውን ሪፖርት ነው በዋናነት ሰምራይዝ ማድረግ የፈለግነው። ሪፖርቱ የትምህርት ቤት ሁኔታ ወይም አጠቃላይ የትምህርት ስርዓቱ ምን ይመስላል የሚለውን ነው የሚቃኘው። በዚህ ሪፖርት 3 ክፍሎች አሉት። የመጀመሪያው መግቢያ የሚሆነን እና የፖለቲካ እንደምታው ወይም ነባራዊ ሁኔታውን እንቃኛለን። ከዛ ዋና ዋና ግኝቶችን በሁለተኛው ክፍል እንዳስሳለን። በመጨረሻው ያሉትን ዋና ግኝቶችና መደረግ ያለባቸውን ብለን የምናስባቸውን ምክረ ሀሳቦች የምናቀርብበት ነው።
Thank you. So we're going to start with just a very brief political context, just to talk about why we're putting together this report. And so the current ruling party, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his Oromo Prosperity Party, have been in power now for over 6 years. And since they took office, there's been a number of conflicts and outbreaks of violence throughout the country, including the devastating war in northern Ethiopia from November 2020 to November 2022. As we all know, the northern war encompassed 3 regions, namely Amhara, Afar, and Tigray. And Amhara was actually one of the most devastated during that conflict, which came to an end in November 2nd, 2022, with the signing of a cessation of hostilities agreement. However, that process was highly criticized for being non-transparent and for sidelining the Amhara community from the deal, and essentially forming a war pact between the Oromo Prosperity Party regime of Abiy Ahmed and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. And as a result of that process, that flawed process, the fighting ended in Tigray. However, violence and eventually war would continue in Amhara. And so in April 2023, near the beginning of the year, protests broke out in 30 plus cities and towns in Amhara region, across the region. And this was on the anniversary of Prime Minister Abiy taking office, and this would continue for weeks. These were peaceful demonstrations that were essentially calling for an end to ethnic-based violence and the genocide against the Amhara people, as well as other similar concerns such as political marginalization of the Amhara people, ethnic-based denials of travel, ethnic-based home demolitions and evictions, essentially ethnic cleansing in Addis Ababa city and other parts of the country, as well as again, the genocide and violence in Oromia targeting Amhara civilians. And so by the end of the month of April, essentially, instead of addressing the political grievances that were raised peacefully by the public, the Abiy Ahmed regime actually chose to wage war and declare a law enforcement operation in the region. And so the regime actually deployed a very large number of forces that escalated. And then in August of 2023, a state of emergency was imposed, which was later extended. And throughout this period now, which has essentially extended to almost 2 years, the region has been embroiled in armed conflict. AAA has documented casualties resulting from this conflict, including those targeting civilians. And just for the period between the state of emergency being announced in December 2024, so end of last year, AAA has recorded at least 5,052 civilian casualties, including around 4,000 fatalities and 1,000 injuries. And so what this highlights is that the civilian toll of the conflict has been very devastating. And so the civilians have bore the brunt. And as part of that, there's been targeted attacks against educational facilities, medical facilities, basic infrastructure, private property, and so on through the use of force, primarily by the joint armed forces of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's regime. And that includes the ENDF, state militias, riot dispersal, and so on. And so these forces have perpetrated patterns of violence amounting to war crimes and crimes against humanity. and a large part of that are attacks on civilian targets, such as schools.
ወደ ሪፖርቱ ግኝቶች ከመሄዳችን በፊት አሁን ያለንበት ወቅታዊ ሁኔታ ላይ የደረስነው እንዴት ነው የሚለውን ዋና ዋና የሆኑ በሀገሪቷ ፖለቲካ ውስጥ ዋና ዋና የሆኑ ክስተቶችን ለማስታወስ ያክል እንደምታውቁት በ2018 በፈረንጆች አቆጣጠር የአብይ ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር የሆነበትና የኦሮሞ ብልጽግና በኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ህወሓትን ተክቶ ስልጣን የተቆጣጠረበት ጊዜ ነው። ያንን ተከትሎ ሁላችንም እንደምናስታውሰው ለ2 ዓመታት በሰሜን ኢትዮጵያ በተለይም በአማራ፣ አፋርና ትግራይ ሪጅኖች ጦርነት መደረጉን እናስታውሳለን። በዛ ጦርነት ሂደት ውስጥ የአማራ ክልል በከፍተኛ ውድመት ከደረሰባቸው ክልሎች አንዱ ነው። በኖቨምበር 2022 ብልጽግና እና የትነግ የተኩስ ማቆም ስምምነታቸው መፈረማቸውን ተከትሎ በትግራይ ጦርነት የቆመ ቢሆንም በተኩስ አቁም ስምምነቱ እና በአጠቃላይ በፕሪቶሪያ ስምምነት በሚባለው ሂደት ውስጥ የአማራ ኃይሎች እንዳይሳተፉ በማድረግ ይልቁንም ሁለቱ ኃይሎች የራሳቸውን ዋር ፓክት ወይም የጦር አሊያንስ የፈጠሩበት በመሆኑ ከዛ ጋር ተያይዞ የሚነሱ የአማራ ህዝብ የሚያነሳቸው ጥያቄዎችም ሆነ በጦርነቱ ተሳታፊ የሆነባቸው ምክንያቶች ሳይመለሱ በመቅረታቸው እና ከዛም አልፎ በጦርነት ይህንን የፕሪቶሪያ ስምምነትን ተከትሎ የአብይ አገዛዝ አማራ ክልል ላይ ያሉ ታጠቁ ኃይሎችን የራሱ የመንግስት መዋቅሩን ጨምሮ እና ፋኖን ጨምሮ ትጥቅ አስፈታለሁ በሚል የሎ ኢንፎርስመንት ወይም የህግ ማስከበር ዘመቻ ብሎ ማወጁን እናስታውሳለን። ከዛም በፊት በርካታ በጦርነቱ ወቅትም ከጦርነቱ በፊትም ከጦርነቱ በኋላም በተደጋጋሚ የአማራ ህዝብ ተከታታይ ሰላማዊ ሰልፎችን በማድረግ በኦሮሚያ ክልል እና በሌሎች መሰል ክልሎች የሚደረገው ማፈናቀል፣ ዘር ማጽዳትና ጭፍጨፋ እንዲቆም ጥያቄዎች ሲያቀርቡ ነበር። በተመሳሳይ በሚያዝያ 2023ም በተለይ በአብይ ባለ ሹመት ማግስት በ30 በላይ ከተሞች በአማራ ክልል ተመሳሳይ ጥያቄዎችን የያዙ ሰላማዊ ሰልፎች መደረጋቸውን እናስታውሳለን። ያንን ተከትሎ አገዛዙ ወደ በጅምላ ማሰርና የመግደል እርምጃዎች መውሰዱን እናስታውሳለን። ከዛም አልፎ የህግ ማስከበር ዘመቻ በሚል አማራ ክልል ላይ ጦርነት ያወጀበትን በኋላም እንዳሰበው ህግ ማስከበሩ ባሰበው መንገድ አለመሄዱን ተከትሎ በሐምሌ 2023 ወይም በፈረንጆቹ ኦገስት 4 2023 የአጠቃላይ በአማራ ክልል እና ሌሎች አማራዎች በሚገኙባቸው ሁሉም አካባቢዎች ስቴት ኦፍ ኢመርጀንሲ ማወጁን እና ያም ስቴት ኦፍ ኢመርጀንሲ ለ4 ወራት በየካቲት 24 መራዘሙን እናስታውሳለን። ይህ ከታወጀበት ጊዜ ጀምሮ የአማራ ማህበራችን በሲቪሊያኖች ላይ የደረሱ ሰቆቃዎችን ስንዘግብ ቆይተናል። በስቴት ኦፍ ኢመርጀንሲ ከታወጀበት ኦገስት 4 እስከ ዲሴምበር 2024 ድረስ ባሉት ወራቶች ብቻ ከ5,000 በላይ ንጹሃን ዜጎች ጉዳት እንደደረሳቸው አብዛኞቹ የተገደሉ መሆናቸው እና መሰል ጥናቶች መሰል ሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰቶችን በዴዲኬትድ በሆነ ሪፖርት ማውጣታችንን እናስታውሳለን። የዛሬው ሪፖርት ግን በትምህርት ስርዓቱ ላይ የደረሱ ውድመቶችን ማሳየት አስበን እዛ ላይ ያተኮረ ብቻ መሆኑን ማስገንዘብ እንወዳለን።
Thank you. So this is our layout for the report summary. We're going to start by going into the scope of the report, and then we're going to follow with the samples of patterns of attacks, of occupation of educational facilities, and the impact of the devastation against the education system. And over here we have a photo that was generously provided by photojournalist Jamal Kaunas for Getty Images. And so this was taken during the Northern Ethiopia War. However, it captures the types of targeted attacks that educational facilities have faced in Amhara region.
ወደ ሪፖርት ሁለተኛ ክፍል ነው። በዋናነት ብዙ ዲቴሎችን አናካትትም። ነገር ግን አራት መሰረታዊ ጉዳዮችን እንዳስሳለን። አንደኛ የውድመቱን መጠን የሚያሳዩ፣ ሁለተኛ እንደ ምሳሌ የሚሆኑ ጥቃት አይነቶችን የጉዳት የደረሰባቸውን ትምህርት ቤቶች ዝርዝር እናሳያለን። ከዛ በሚሊተሪ ቁጥጥር ውስጥ ሆነው እንደ ሚሊተሪ ካምፕ ጥቅም ላይ የዋሉትን ትምህርት ቤቶች ሁኔታ እናሳያለን። ከዛ ባለፈ ሰፋ ባለ የትምህርት ቤቶች ውድመት እና መዘጋት የሚያደርሰውን ተጽዕኖ የሚያሳይ ክፍል ይኖረናል።
So to begin, the scope of this report looks at devastation of the educational system in Amhara region for the 2024-2025 school year. It encompasses 11 zonal administrations in Amhara region across 4 sub-regions. And so these include the North Shoa zone, North Wedlo zone, the North Gondar zone, Central Gondar, South Gondar, West Gondar, and then East Kodjam, West Kodjam, North Kodjam, Awi, and Bahar Dar cities. And so noteworthy are the exclusion of several zonal administrations in the scope of this report, and that was to difficulties with obtaining information as a result of the ongoing conflict, including fear from informants of potential reprisals by the regime forces. And so out of consideration of that, this is a partial representation of the total impact of the educational system, and rather than focusing on the overall numbers, the trends would be more helpful to emphasize. And so zones such as the South Wedlo zone, the Waghemra zone, and others were not included for the purposes of this report. However, the trends highlight a number of patterns, including patterns with student enrollment and educational delivery, the status of educational facilities or schools, the impact of prolonged closures of schools, attacks on educational facilities, repurposing of educational facilities as military outposts, and overall, the figure that has emerged has been that over 4.4 million children are out of school in Amhara region, and over 6,000 schools have been forced to close. And so this report seeks to highlight those trends.
የደህንነት ስጋት ስለፈጠረ ሁሉንም ዞኖች አላካተትንም። በተለይ እንደ ደቡብ ወሎ፣ ዋግምራ እንዲሁም ወልቃይት ሁመራን ጨምሮ የተለያዩ አንዳንድ ዞኖች አልተካተቱም። ሆኖም ግን በቀሪዎቹ በአካተትናቸው 11 ዞኖች ውስጥ ከ4.4 ሚሊዮን ህጻናት ከትምህርት ገበታ ውጭ መሆናቸውን እና ወደ 6,000 የሚጠጉ ትምህርት ቤቶች መዘጋታቸውን የሪፖርቱ ያሳያል።
So this is actually an executive summary taken directly from the report. This is table 1. For those of you who are able to follow the chat, you can actually see the report as the first link shared in the chat, and you can access this table from there. And it shows just by sub-region what the trends of the patterns have been, with totals at the bottom. And so, as I said before, this is a partial representation of the overall toll. For example, for the zones that we accounted for, the 11 zones, we were able to account for about 3.5 million students out of school, and number of schools about 5,200 closed. So these figures are reduced compared to the ones that we cited, for the reason that some zones were not able to investigate.
ይሄ ቴብል በቀጥታ ከኤክስኪዩቲቭ ሰመሪ ወይም አጠቃሎ ከምንለው የመጣ ነው። እንግዲህ እንደምታዩት በእያንዳንዱ ዞን የተዘጉ ትምህርት ቤቶች እና ኦፕሬሽናል የሆኑ ትምህርት ቤቶችን እናሳያለን። እነዚህ ቶታሉን ስደምሩት ወይም ድምሩ ከቅድም ከጠቀስነው ቁጥር ትንሽ ቀነስ ይላል። ያን ታሳቢ ያደረግነው በአንዳንድ ዞኖች ሪፖርት ውስጥ ስላልተካተቱ እንደሆነ ቁጥር ልዩነቱ እንደመጣ ነገር ግን እነዚህ በዚህ በቴብሉ ላይ የምታያቸው በተጨባጭ መሬት ላይ ያሉትን የተዘጉትን ትምህርት ቤቶች እና በመረጃ ላይ ተመስርተን የቆጠርናቸው መሆኑን ከዛ ፊት የነበረው ግን በአጠቃላይ በክልሉ ያለውን ሁኔታ ያሳያል ብለን ያሰብነውን ቁጥር እንደሆነ ታሳቢ እንዲደረግ ነው ማለት ነው።
Just before proceeding, if the person who just attacks on educational facilities, this is one of the patterns of the devastation of the education system that we identified, and across the 4 sub-regions included in this report in the 11 zones, at least 1,100 educational facilities have been destroyed. These facilities have sustained damages from attacks including heavy artillery shelling, drone strikes, and setting buildings on fire. And of course, drone strikes have been a particularly devastating weapon that has been used by the Abiy regime. And these drone strikes have resulted in a pattern of indiscriminate violence targeting civilians and civilian institutions. To the right, we have an example of instances of attacks on educational facilities in the Gojam sub-region specifically, detailing the location of the school, the date of the incident, and the type of the attack. So many of them are drone strikes, but some are shelling, some are explosives, some are fires. And this is not an exhaustive list, meaning that this is just examples of incidents that our investigations were able to identify and list.
ይሄ በስላይድ የሚያሳየው በትምህርት ቤቶች የደረሰባቸውን ውድመት በቀጥታ በአገዛዙ ኃይሎች በደረሰባቸው ጥቃት ምክንያት የደረሰባቸውን ውድመት ለማሳየት ታስቦ ነው። አጠቃላይ ሪፖርትም ሆነ ይሄኛው ቴብል የደረሰውን ሙሉ ጉዳት ያሳያል ብለን አናስብም። በዋናነት ትሬንዱ ፓተርኑ እና የደረሱትን ጥቃቶች ባህሪ ማሳየት ታስቦ የቀረበ ነው። ሆኖም ግን በተጨባጭ ካየነው በአትሊስት 1169 የሚሆኑ ትምህርት ቤቶች በአራቱም ክፍለ ሀገራት በአገዛዙ ኃይሎች ውድመት ደርሶባቸዋል። በቀኝ በኩል የምታዩት ቴብል የሚያሳየው የተወሰኑ ጉዳት የደረሰባቸውን ትምህርት ቤቶች ዝርዝር ነው። እንደ ምሳሌ በዋናነት ከጎጃም ሰንጠረዡ ላይ እንደምታዩት አብዛኞቹ ትምህርት ተቋማት ጉዳት የደረሰባቸው በድሮን ድብደባ ምክንያት ነው። አንዳንዶቹ በቀጥታ በእሳት እንዲቃጠሉ የተደረገበት ሁኔታ አለ። አንዳንዶቹ በከባድ መሳሪያ የተደበደቡበት ሁኔታ አለ። የሚያሳየው ምንድነው? በአጠቃላይ በትምህርት ስርዓቱ ላይ ከፍተኛ ውድመት እንደደረሰና ትምህርት ቤቶች ስራ ለመስራታቸው ብቻ ሳይሆን በአጭር ጊዜ ተመልሰው ፈንክሽናል ወይም ስራ መስራት የሚችሉበት ሁኔታ ላይ እንደማይሆኑ እና ለጉዳቱ ረጅም ጊዜ መዘዝ ይዞ የሚመጣ እንደሆነ የሚያሳይ ነው።
Next, we have another trend, which was occupation of educational facilities, which have been used as military camps for prolonged periods of time. And so, for example, in just the one sub-region, as shown on the right, at least 75 schools have been converted into military encampments, including primary and secondary schools. And so when these areas are used as military camps, then this is a primary reason why these educational facilities would be unable to provide educational services for children in the area, contributing to the high number of students out of schools. And so we have just a list of identified schools which had been converted into military camps. To the right, again, it's a partial list, it's not exhaustive, but it gives an idea of just how widespread this pattern is, not just in various wardas, but even in major cities that are quite populous and serve a very large number of residents.
እዚህ ስላይድ ላይ የምናየው የጦር ሰራዊቱ ወይም የአገዛዙ ሰራዊት ሚሊተሪ ኮማንድ ሴንተር የተጠቀመባቸው ያሉ ትምህርት ቤቶችን ነው። ይሄ አንዱ በሪፖርታችን ያሳየ ነው። በስፋት ትምህርት ተቋማቶች ላይ ጉዳት እያደረሰ ያለና አገዛዙ እየፈጸመው ያለው የህግ ጥሰት ነው። እንደ በቀኝ በኩል እንደምታዩ ሰንጠረዡ እንደ ምሳሌ የሚሆኑ አሁን በሪፖርቱ በተጻፈበት ወቅት አገዛዙ እንደ ሚሊተሪ አውትፖስት የተጠቀምባቸው የነበሩ የትምህርት ተቋማቶችን ዝርዝር ያሳያል። ቅድም እንዳልነው ሙሉ ዝርዝር አይደለም። ዓላማው ያው ህግን በጣሰ ዓለም አቀፍ ህግን በጣሰ ሁኔታ አገዛዙ እነዚህን ትምህርት ተቋማቶች ለጦርነት
This meeting is being recorded.
እነዚህን ተቋማቶች ያለምንም እፍረት የሚሊተሪ ካምፕ አድርጎ እየተጠቀሙባቸው እንደሆነ ማሳያት ያሳያል። ይሄ ማለት በዓለም አቀፍ ህግ መሰረት በዓለም አቀፍ ጦርነት ህግ የኤጁኬሽን ተቋማቶች እና በአጠቃላይ የሲቪል ሰርቪስ ለንጹሃን ዜጎች አገልግሎት የሚሰጡ ተቋማቶች በሙሉ ታርጌት መደረግ የለባቸውም። በጦርነት ፋሲሊቲ ሆነው መያዝ መጠቀም ወይም ጥቅም ላይ መዋል የለባቸውም። ያንን በጣሰ ሁኔታ በአደባባይ አገዛዙ የተጠቀመባቸው እንደሆነ እና ተቋማቶቹ ላይ ጉዳት ከማድረስም ባለፈ የዓለም አቀፍ ጦር ወንጀልን ህግ በጣሰ ሁኔታ የብዙ በርካታ ትምህርት ተቋማቶችን ወደ ጦር ካምፕ አድርጎ የተጠቀመባቸው እንደሆነ ያሳያል።
This brings us to our third and final section, which is conclusions. And here we're going to just summarize the findings of the report, as well as provide recommendations prepared by the AAA team, addressing some of the patterns that were identified in this report.
ይህ ወደ መጨረሻው እና ሶስተኛው ወደ ሆነው ክፍል ያመጣናል። በዚህኛው ክፍል ዋና ዋና ግኝቶችን እንደገና እናቀርብና ድርጅታችን ዓለም አቀፍ ተቋማቶችም ሆነ ሌሎች የሚመለከታቸው አካላቶች ይህንን ችግር ከመፍታት አንጻር መስራት አለባቸው የምንላቸውን ምክር ሀሳቦች እናቀርብበታል።
So firstly, starting with summary findings from the report, there's three main messages to take away from the findings of this report. And again, we encourage everyone to read the report to get more details of some of the trends that we mentioned in this presentation. But the first really is that access to education has been hindered, impacting the majority of students, school-age children in the region. And so 60% of students are currently unable to access education. And this problem has been worsened by ongoing insecurity, including the armed conflict, which has provoked fear and in some cases even displacement, again, due to the simple reason that much of the time, the indiscriminate violence, including through use of weapons such as drone strikes, has targeted the civilian population, leading to insecurity. And secondly, it's that there's a very concerning trend of low enrollment as a result of this inaccess, and student registration and enrollment numbers are drastically reduced. Devastating impact on future prospects for the economy, for the country as a whole, as an entire generation of young people are unable to equip themselves with the training to.
This meeting is being recorded.
Pursue certain careers, and essentially has altered their life paths in a very devastating way that will affect the economy as well. And then lastly, we have concerns over the quality of provision of education, even in the small amount of areas where schools have been able to operate. Due to the displacement, for example, and the insecurity in surrounding areas, in areas where schooling is available, they often face shortages of critical supplies. Not only this, sometimes inconsistent attendance, sometimes conversely overcrowded classrooms with people from rural areas flooding into main cities, and then inadequate infrastructure to deal with the influx of additional students. And of course, insecurity and a lack of security and safety for students who are forced to make very long journeys to have access to schooling.
ከዚህ ሪፖርት ሶስት ዋና መልእክቶችን ማስቀመጥ እንፈልጋለን። የመጀመሪያው ነገር በአጠቃላይ በአማራ ክልል የትምህርት ስርዓት በሙሉ መፈረካከሱን እና በዚህም ምክንያት በትንሹ ከ60% በላይ የሚሆኑ ህፃናት ወይም እድሜያቸው ለትምህርት የደረሰ ልጆች ከትምህርት ገበታ ውጭ መሆናቸውን እና ይህም ደግሞ በአጠቃላይ በክልሉ ካለው ግጭት ጦርነት ጋር ተያይዞ በስፋት ንጹሃን የመፈናቀል እና አጠቃላይ የፍርሃት ድባብ ውስጥ በመሆናቸው ትምህርት ቤት መሄድ እንደ አጠቃላይ የማይቻልበት ሁኔታ ነው ያለው። በዚህም ምክንያት በከፍተኛ የሆነ የተማሪ ቁጥር መቀነስ አለ። ምንም እንኳ አገዛዙ በተለያዩ መንገድ ጫና እያደረገ ተማሪዎች የተወሰነ ወደ ትምህርት ቤት እንዲመጡ በማድረግ ስቴት ኦፍ ኖርማልሲ ወይም ክልሉን ተቆጣጥሬዋለሁ ለማለት በሚያስችል ሁኔታ የፎቶና የቪዲዮ ሾዎችን ለማዘጋጀት ሙከራ ቢያደርግም እንዲያም ሆነ እንኳን በአጠቃላይ ክልሉ ላይ የተማሪ ቁጥር በከፍተኛ ሁኔታ በመቀነሱ እና በዚህ ምክንያት ትውልዱ ከትምህርት በመራቁ ለሚቀጥሉት በርካታ አስርተ ዓመታት ተጽዕኖ የሚያሳድር በወጣቶችም ላይ በራሳቸው ሕይወት ላይ ከፍተኛ ጉዳት የሚያደርስ እንዲሁም በአጠቃላይ በክልሉም ሆነ በሀገሪቷ ላይ ኢኮኖሚ ላይ ትልቅ ጫና የሚፈጥር የክራይሲስ ውስጥ መግባቱን ያሳያል። በጥቂት በሚባሉት ትምህርት ቤቶች የሚሰጠው ትምህርትም በጥራት ደረጃ በጣም የወረደ መሆኑን እና የዚህም ምክንያቱም ከጦርነቱ ጋር ተያይዞ በቋሚነት ትምህርት የማይሰጥበት ሁኔታ በመኖሩ ከመፍራት አንጻር ተማሪዎች በቋሚነት ትምህርት ቤት የማይሄዱ በመሆናቸው በአጠቃላይ በጦርነቱ ምክንያት ከደረሰው የኢኮኖሚ ድቀት አንጻር የድህነት ተከትሎ ከፍተኛ የሆነ የምግብ እጥረት በመኖሩ እንዲሁም ደግሞ የመሰረተ ልማቱ በሙሉ በቀጥታ በአገዛዙ በመውደሙ ወይም በጦርነቱ ምክንያት አስፈላጊ የሆነ ግብዓት እየቀረበ ባለመሆኑ እና ከገጠር አካባቢ ወይም ጦርነት ያለባቸው አካባቢ ያሉ ህፃናቶች ወደ ከተማ ሄደው ለመማር ወይም ከጦርነት የተሻለ ደህንነት አለ ወደሚባለው አካባቢ በመሄድ ለመማር በሚያደርጉት ጥረት ምክንያት ከፍተኛ የሆኑ የተማሪ ቁጥር በጥቂት ትምህርት ቤቶች ከመኖር ጋር ተያይዞ ኦቨርክራውድድ የሆኑ ክላስሩሞች ምክንያት አጠቃላይ ኳሊቲው የወረደበትን ሁኔታ እናያለን። ከዚህ በመነሳት በአጠቃላይ በአማራ ክልል ያለው የትምህርት ስርዓት በሙሉ ክራይሲስ ውስጥ ሲጅ ውስጥ ነው ያለው ብለን ከርዕሱም እንዳስቀመጥነው የምንገልጽበት ሁኔታ ነው ያለው። ይሄ ደግሞ ከዚህ ትውልድ ባለፈ ለሚቀጥለው ትውልድም ከፍተኛ የሆነ ጉዳት የሚያመጣ ነገር ነው።
This brings us to our final slide, which is just recommendations to different stakeholders. And this is really important because this is where there can be advocacy and where findings from our report can directly inform policy changes to make a difference. And so the first is the African Union. So AAA is calling on the African Commission of Human and People's Rights to deploy a fact-finding mission to investigate allegations of human rights violations or violations rather of international law, including attacks on educational facilities and other civilian targets. And next, we're calling for regional diplomacy from sister nations to pressure the regime to end its genocidal siege on the Amhara people. Moving forward, we have recommendations for the UN bodies, particularly the Human Rights Council, as well as UNESCO. And we're calling on them to establish an independent commission, again, to investigate independently these allegations of gross human rights violations, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocidal acts, to appoint a special reporter to be dedicated simply to the war on Amhara, similarly to the kinds of actions that were taken during the Northern Ethiopia War, and to advocate for legal accountability. We're calling on various international observers and really Western countries such as the United States, Canada, the European Union, and other countries to impose targeted sanctions on military officials and political officials involved in these acts of gross human rights violations, to increase humanitarian assistance to those in need in the region as it continues to suffer war that's impacting millions, leading to food insecurity in various parts of the region, to support, again, independent investigators. And lastly, our recommendations to global human rights organizations is to join us in expanding documentation and reporting of what's been happening, the trends of human rights violations, for example, in the context of education, in the context of healthcare, and the various other issues, for example, sexual and gender-based violence, which have really not garnered as much attention as they should have, given the scale of the fighting and the severity of the violations and their scale. And lastly, to advocate for protection of education so that the future generation of leaders can have access to schooling and can learn in safety, feeling protected, and to end this siege on the educational system.
የመጨረሻው ስላይድ ላይ በአጠቃላይ ከገለጽነው ችግር አንጻር የመፍትሄ ሀሳቦችን ነው ማቅረብ የምንፈልገው። በተለይም ለተለያዩ ዓለም አቀፍ ተቋማቶች ይህን ሁኔታ ከመፍታት አንጻር የሚጠበቅባቸውን ሚና እንዲጫወቱ እናሳስባለን። በአፍሪካ ህብረት የአፍሪካን ኮሚሽን ፎር ሂውማን ኤንድ ፒፕልስ ራይት የራሱ የሆነ የእውነት ፍለጋ ሚሽን ወደ አማራ ክልል በመላክ በትምህርት ተቋማቶችም ሆነ በአጠቃላይ በንጹሃን ዜጎች ላይ የደረሰውን የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት እንዲሰነድ እንዲያጣራ እንጠይቃለን። የአፍሪካ ህብረት ፒስ ኤንድ ሴኩሪቲ ካውንስል በክልሉ አካባቢ ያለው ግጭት የሚፈታበትን መንገድ እንዲያጠናና ግፊት እንዲያደርግ እንጠይቃለን። በተለይም በአፍሪካ ዩኒየን ውስጥ የሚንቀሳቀሱ ሪጂናል ዲፕሎማሲ ኃይሎች የኦሮሞ ብልጽግና መንግስት በትምህርት ተቋማቶችም በአጠቃላይ በአማራ ህዝብ ላይ እያደረሰ ያለው ዘር ማጥፋት ወንጀል እንዲያቆም ግፊት እንዲያደርጉ እንጠይቃለን። በተመሳሳይ በዩኤን ደረጃ ያሉ መሰል ኤጀንሲዎች የራሳቸውን ኢንዲፔንደንት ኮሚሽን በማቋቋም አማራ ክልል ላይ የደረሰውን የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት እና በትምህርት ተቋማቶች ላይ እየደረሰ ያለውን ውድመት እንዲያጣሩና እንዲያወግዙ እንጠይቃለን። ለዚሁም ሲባል በቋሚነት የአማራ ክልል ሁኔታ የሚከታተል ስፔሻል ራፖርተር አሳይን እንዲያደርጉ ወይም እንዲመድቡ እንጠይቃለን። እስካሁን በቀረቡት በእኛም ጥናቶችም ሆነ በሌሎች መሰል ተቋማቶች የቀረቡ የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት ሪፖርቶችን እና የዩኤን የራሱን ሪፖርቶች መሰረት በማድረግ ለተፈጸሙ ሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰቶች የህግ ተጠያቂነት እንዲኖር በሚመለከታቸው የዩኤን ኤጀንሲዎች በኩል እንዲሰሩ እንጠይቃለን። በተመሳሳይ የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰቶችን ዶክመንት በማድረግ እና በመከላከል ዙሪያ የሚሰሩ ዓለም አቀፍ ተቋማቶች በአማራ ክልል ላይ እየደረሰ ያለውን ሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት ዶክመንት ለማድረግ የሚሰሩትን ስራ እንዲያጠናክሩና በስፋት እየደረሰ ያለውን የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት እንዲሰንዱ እንጠይቃለን። በትምህርት ተቋማቶች ከጦርነት አውድማ እንዳይሆኑና ጦርነት ህጻናቶች ያለምንም ስጋት ትምህርት መማር የሚችሉበትን ሁኔታ ለመፍጠር የአገዛዙ ኃይሎች ያደረሱት ያለውን ውድመት እና የትምህርት ተቋማቶችን ለይቶ ማጥቃት ወንጀል እንዲያቆሙ ግፊት እንዲያደርጉ እንጠይቃለን። በመጨረሻ የምዕራባውያን መንግስታቶች በተለይም ዩኤስን፣ ካናዳን፣ የአውሮፓ ህብረት በአገዛዙ መሪዎች ላይ ለፈጸሟቸውን ወንጀል መሰረት በማድረግ ማዕቀብ በመጣል ጫና እንዲያደርጉ ለሰብአዊ መብት ሰብአዊ እርዳታ ተደራሽ እንዲሆን ድጋፍ እንዲያደርጉና ባላቸው የእነሱ መንግስታት መዋቅር በመጠቀም ሰፊ የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት መድረሱን የሚያሳዩ ራሳቸውን የቻሉ ኢንዲፔንደንት ኢንቨስቲጌሽኖች በማድረግ ግፊት እንዲያደርጉ እናሳስባለን።
Thank you all for attending this press briefing. That brings us to the end of our presentation. For those who want to follow AAA's developments and updates on a regular basis, you're invited to see our website at www.amharaamerica.org. For those who have inquiries at any time, you're welcome to send an email to our address at info@amharaamerica.org, and to follow us across social media networks, including Facebook, X, Telegram, YouTube, and recently TikTok as well. And so at this point, we're ready to take questions from those attending.
እናመሰግናለን ስለመጣችሁና ስለተገስታችሁ የትሪፕል ኤ ማህበራዊ ሚዲያ ገጾች እዚህ ጋር አሉ። ምናልባት አሁን ጥያቄዎችን የምናስተናግድበት ጊዜ ነው። ጥያቄዎች ካሉ ጥያቄ ያለው ሰው መጠየቅ ይችላል።
ማይክሮፎን ከፍተን ነው ወይስ እጅ እናውጣ ሆነ?
ችግር የለውም ቀጥል። ትንገርት I think.
Okay. Thank you, Teddy, Robel, and Hona. I really thank you guys for whatever effort that you do to bring this to the international attention. I have one question to Teddy and Robel, and probably two more questions for Hona. Well, you know, this is really shocking and devastating. I mean, looking at the reports and the sheer scale of the damage, really shows me the widespread disruption to education and the apparent intent to undermine the Amhara people's future. Is really seems to me is a deliberate attempt by the government. So, do you guys believe that there is a significant social and cultural dimensions to this conflict that needs to be acknowledged and addressed? I mean, this doesn't seem that this is the schools are just you know, this is not happening just because the schools are located in the crossfire, or the schools are located in a conflict zone. It seems there is a deliberate target by the government to just and somehow to affect the future of the Amhara children. So probably this might have a cultural and social dimension. So just really wanted to know if you guys have implicated that into your report. The other thing is like, again, on the recommendation, I mean, as you know that we have the largest diaspora in the world, particularly among the Ethiopians, where the Amharas are the largest diaspora groups. So do you guys, have you really recognized the importance and the potential of this diaspora, particularly in involving the diaspora in the post-conflict or in the reconstruction efforts, and where the diaspora could play into the reconstruction of the schools that have been damaged by the war? So probably it would be really a massive scale to capitalize on. So let me know if you guys also have seen the potential of the diaspora, where the role of the diaspora could be, you know, seen in probably in the reconstruction effort, or whatever attempts that we are going to take in somehow የትምህርት ቤቶቹን ደህንነትና አሁን ያሉበትን ደረጃ በማስተካከል ደረጃ የዲያስፖራው ሚና በምን ደረጃ ልታሳዩ ትችላላችሁ የሚለውን ለማንሳት ፈልጌ ነው። The other thing, you know, this is now like በጣም በርካታ ሪፖርቶችን ነው ትሪፕል ኤ የሚያወጣው every 6 months እና በየስድስት ወሩ የሚወጡ ሪፖርቶች አሉ፣ በየአመቱ የሚወጡ ሪፖርቶች አሉ ሆነና እነዚህ ሪፖርቶች ለምዕራባውያን አቴንሽን ከመቅረባቸው ባሻገር በተጨባጭ እንደው የራሳችንን ህዝብ አስተባብረን አንዳንዶቹን ነገሮች ራሳችን አሁን ለምሳሌ ጦርነቱ ሲያልቅ ወደ ሪኮንስትራክሽን ኢፈርት እንገባለን እንላለን፣ ግን አንዳንድ ቦታ ላይ ራሳችን ዛሬ መጀመር ያለብን ዲያስፖራውን አቅሙን ማስተባበር ያለብን ሁኔታ መኖር ያለበት አይመስላችሁም ወይ? ትሪፕል ኤ አድቮኬሲውን ሪፖርቶችን ለዓለም አቀፉ ማህበረሰብ ከመስጠት ባሻገር ፕራክቲካል የሆኑ አክሽኖች ውስጥ የሚገባበት ሁኔታ ላይ ያሰበበት ሁኔታ አለ ወይ? ለምሳሌ በትምህርት፣ በጤና፣ በአንዳንድ ዘርፎች ላይ ያለውን የማህበረሰብ ችግር አድሬስ በማድረግ ረገድ ትኩረት ሰጥታችሁ ለመስራት ታስባላችሁ ወይ የሚለው ነው። ሌላው ሪኮሜንዴሽናችሁ ላይ አገን ራሱ የአማራው ኮሚኒቲ ምን ማድረግ አለበት የሚለውን ነገር ለምዕራባዊው ለአፍሪካ ህብረት ለሌሎችም ተቋማት የሰጣችሁት ሪኮሜንዴሽን እንዳለ ሆኖ እኛስ ምን ማድረግ አለብን? አማራው ምን ማድረግ አለበት? ዲያስፖራው፣ ሚዲያው፣ የአማራ ሲቪክ ማህበራት፣ የአማራ ሁማኒቴሪያን ተቋማት አሉ በርካታና እነሱ በዚህ በሪኮሜንዴሽን ውስጥ የሚካተቱበት ሁኔታ ቢኖር ጥሩ አይመስላችሁም ወይ የሚለው ነው። ቴንክ ዩ።
Thank you. I guess ጥያቄ የምጠይቀውን ሌላ ሰው ካለ አንድ ሰው ውስጥን ተመልሰን መምጣት እንችላለን። ካለዛ የትምህርቱን ጥያቄዎች መመለስ እንችላለን። አንሚዩት ያደርገ ሰው አይታየኝም። ጥያቄ አለ?
Also, welcome, Mulgeta. Thank you so much for joining us. We didn't get a chance to greet you properly, so thank you for joining.
Hone, since Tungucha had several questions, maybe let's just respond to those first.
Yeah. Do you want me to summarize the questions, or you good to, or you can respond to whatever you?
I mean, I've written some of them, but I think it's important that we all take turns and, to address them. Several of them, and it requires comprehensive response. So I'll try to get started, and maybe I'll address the reporting and work my way up. Tungutu, as you mentioned, AAA does a lot of reports. We do thematic reports like the one that we published this week on the state of the educational system in the Amhara region. This is what we call a thematic report, right? We take one area, we focus on it, investigate it, get all the evidence and report on it, and then we do a lot of advocacy work behind it. We've done other thematic reports, such as on the sexual and gender-based violence against Amhara women during the northern war of Ethiopia. We might do a focus report like we did on Maikadra. But we do a weekly report every Monday afternoon that comes out. It's called Amhara War Update on the war in the Amhara region, where we document all the military operations that's going on, along with the human rights violations. That comes out every Monday afternoon, and we've been doing this now for a little bit over a year. We also have, reports that come out, mini reports. These are called incident reports that might come out, anywhere between 3 to 5 times, per week. So we go through a painstaking process of really doing the investigation and reporting, and not just do we just report, but we also, once we report it, we do advocacy around it to make sure that as many people across the globe are aware of this. And we hope that especially Amhara and Ethiopian-based medias look at this report and report on it. These are investigators that we have on the ground that have gone through human rights investigation training, and get the evidence from the ground in Ethiopia. And this evidence is something that we report on. So that's a little bit on the reporting, and I hope you all, will give it coverage. In terms of the diaspora efforts, the diaspora has done a lot of, support over the years, for the Amharas that have been impacted. AAA was one of the leading organizers of Amhara Emergency Fund, where we raised over $2 million and supported Amhara civilians during the war in northern Ethiopia. We assisted women that were brutally raped by the TPLF. We helped farmers. We provided financial assistance to families who had lost the breadwinner in their family members. We have provided support to hospitals. There are Amhara organizations who had been building schools for orphan children. So, and we did that also previous to Amhara Emergency Fund, the Amhara Rehabilitation Fund. We did that as well. It is challenging right now for Amhara organizations in the diaspora to provide this type of support at scale that's needed. But we know that Amhara organizations in the diaspora will step up to the effort and also scale to what's needed to help rebuild, health centers, schools, and other civilian infrastructure, so that people can get back into as quickly as possible to rebuilding their life and get back into normalcy, so children can go to school, so medical health professionals can help those that have survived this brutal genocidal war. It's just very challenging right now. There are Amhara organizations that are providing support. It's very, very difficult. It's very challenging. But we know that the organizations are ready to step up and fill that void and the need, once they're able to do so at the scale that is needed. In terms of like the social and cultural aspect, the society is devastated right now and will be devastated for generations to come. When you have, basically the society that's torn apart, when you have, tens of thousands of people being killed, being maimed, right? Psychologically impacted, especially the children, it's very difficult for the society to recover quickly unless there is an international effort that steps in to help rebuild this community. We're talking over 60% of the children out of school, thousands of schools that are no longer available. The health center that is almost just as equally, that has basically collapsed, similar to the schools. So, these are the institutions that help build a society. So you have children that are not going to be educated, that are not going to know their history, right? They are not going to have an opportunity, to exercise the culture and build on that culture and progress up in it because they can't get together, right? Schools is where children, come together as in a society, get to know together, get to know each other, not just, make friends, but it's also where they learn their history, their culture. It reinforces their identity, right? Even, religious institutions, you have a society that's not going to, churches and mosques. Why? Because it's very dangerous. And some of these religious institutions have been attacked. How does a society reinforce their identity, their cultural identity, their religious identity, right? Their historical identity, if these major institutions are not readily available to them? So there is a huge impact to that. There is a little bit of that coverage in there, but not to the extent in the report, but not to the extent that we would like to, not to the extent that it should be covered. This is also an area that we, discuss heavily as an organization. The one thing that we ask, coming back to this report, is that we hope that, especially our community and, the broader Ethiopian community that is concerned, what's happening to the Amhara people right now facing this genocidal war. There's a lot of information in this report. There's a lot of data in this report that we hope that you socialize it, educate people, motivate and implore people to be engaged. The media, is very instrumental in this and critical in getting, people's attention and to focus on something that's important. These are our children, right? These are the future of our people. And if generations can be impacted if we don't, step up, mobilize our community to help stop this war, end this war, and get these children back to school, give them hope, and give them, let them know that, that they can, think of a bright future again. Think of, get back to a point to where they can start thinking about like what they want to be when they grow up. I'll stop there and turn it over to my colleagues who might have additional things to add. I hope I addressed most of your questions, Tingritu.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Hona, is it okay if I just continue from Ted? And then, so I think, thank you for the questions, Tingritu. I think those are very important questions. I think to touch on the cultural aspect or the social aspect, the way I see it, I think, and what we've documented as AAA is that there's been a pattern of deliberate acts of violence against civilians. And these are patterns. These are not coincidences. They're not accidents. There's very clear evidence of collective punishment tactics, for example, weaponized hunger. And so we these things, it's not they're not done by accident. These are deliberate strategies of war to punish millions of people at a time. And the deliberate attempts of doing this are directed at not only defeating the combatants, but also at
This meeting is being
something that
recorded.
we've documented on a regular basis in our reports under our new Amhara War Update initiative. Actually, it's not new anymore. It's been over a year. We've been documenting daily instances of human rights violations and the battles. And it's very plain to see much of the time that, for example, in retaliation for military losses, state forces will often, in reprisal, target civilians, or if they feel that they don't have a strong military foothold in a region, they'll go to great lengths to punish the locals, to, for example, take civilians hostage, mothers, children. And so I think the attacks on education are an extension of this pattern. Again, this is why we say there's an Amhara genocide. This is an attempt to, eliminate a group of people for their identity and attacking them socially, economically, removing their means of education is a longstanding pattern. It predates the war. There was a longstanding persecution of, for example, Amhara students, the abductions outside of the Amhara region, the attacks inside Amhara region. So I think there's a very strong case for that, and that's something that we've shown. However, we're always welcome to constructive feedback on these reports, and our goal is to work with our partners like yourselves to improve our reporting, to ensure that future reports can build on them and can uncover these important angles. Otherwise, in terms of the diaspora, I think Ted mentioned it very clearly. A lot of the work that's been done in the there's more work that needs to be done to organize our communities. We have the largest diaspora. We recognize that. This is something that came up as a topic in the recent Journal of Amhara conference, which was a very historic conference that I attended and got a chance to meet you in person also, Tengurtu. I think I really enjoyed it, and I think it was also another eye-opening case of very curated research that essentially showed, for example, the potential of the diaspora, that showed what can be done if people come together. And I think taking the documents like this, we can raise awareness. The work that all of you do as medias is also very important in that respect, raising awareness, educating people. So together, I think we can get a lot done. And I think if that's, those are efforts that we can strengthen going forward. Fostering unity within medias, fostering unity within civic organizations, and ensuring that we have a well-functioning and effective and influential international diaspora, because I think all of us here at AAA believe that the Amhara people have the potential to become one of the most influential diaspora communities in the world. And I think just from the work of AAA, we've gotten a lot of very positive outcomes from the work that we've done just with a small team, limited resources. So I'm confident that with more investment, with more time, with more human resources, with working with promising young people, we can build and we can expand and we can have more impact, especially for rebuilding, which is going to be certainly one of the important next phases of the Amhara movement. I think we're transitioning through a tumultuous period of turmoil, but the next stage is going to be a phase of rebuilding, rehabilitation, and ensuring that what was seen during this war, what was seen during the genocide, will not take place ever again. So with that, I'll lend the floor to my colleague Hona.
And Hona, before you step in, just for everyone's awareness, we will be ending this briefing at 11:25 a.m. So this probably will be the last round of questions. Thank you. Go ahead, Hona, if you have anything. Yeah.
Sorry, Ted, you mean 12:25 p.m.?
Yes, sorry. I'm thinking Central Time Zone instead of Eastern. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay.
12:25, yeah.
But I think ሪዮት አንሚዩት አድርገሻል። ጥያቄዎች ካሉ ያንቺን እንስማና ሌሎችም ካሉ አንድ ላይ አጠቃለን እንዘጋለን።
እሺ አመሰግናለሁ። ሪዮት አለሙ ከመንጊዜም ሚዲያ። በትምህርት ስርዓቱ ላይ እየደረሰ ያለው ውድመትና ይሄም ደግሞ ለቀጣዮቹ ዘመናትና ለትውልድ የሚተርፍ ከፍተኛ ጉዳት እንደሚያስከትል ገልጻችኋል። የድሮን ጥቃቶችና ሌሎች በመንግስት ኃይሎች የሚፈጸሙ ውድመቶችንም እንደዚሁ አስቀምጣችኋልና ይሄ መሰነድ መጋለጥ ያለበት ጉዳይ ስለሆነ የሚያስመሰግን ነው። ሪፖርቱ ክፍተት አለበት ወይንም ደግሞ ሆነ ተብሎ ተዘሏል የሚለው በፋኖ ታጣቂዎች የሚፈጸሙ ሰብአዊና ቁሳዊ ውድመቶችን ነው። ለምሳሌ በቅርቡ በመራዊ የተፈጸመውን ለምን የጠራነውን አድማ ተላለፋችሁ በሚል የተገደሉ መምህራንና ተማሪዎችን መጥቀስ ይቻላል። ለምን ተዘለለ?
መልካም እናመሰግናለን ሪዮት። አይ ቲንክ ከመጨረሻው ጥያቄሽ ብጀምር በቅርቡ የነበረውን ግድያ በተመለከተ እስካሁን እኛም ኢንቨስቲጌት እያደረግነው ነው። ይሄ ሪፖርት
Sorry to interrupt, but should we take other questions in case there are, since this is probably going to be the final round? Yeah, if there are other questions.
ሌላ ስላላየው ነው። ጥያቄ ያለው ካለ መጨረሻ ራውንድ ነው።
Okay, yeah.
ሆነ አንዲት ደቂቃ ካለችኝ እንደው ከዚህ ከሪፖርታችሁ ጋር ብቻ ሳይሆን አንዲት ጫን ነገር ልጨምርና ትሪፕል ኤንድ አሳይመንት ቢወስዳት ብዬ ነው። ብዙ ኢንተርናሽናል ሚዲያ አውትሌቶችን ስመለከት የዚህ አማራን ክልል ኮንፍሊክት ሚስ ሪፕሬዘንት የሚያደርጉታል። they usually frame the fanos as government allies in the previous war እና ዛሬ የኤፒን የትላንትናውንም ሪፖርት አይታችሁት ከሆነ አብዛኞቹ የሚወጡ ሪፖርት ላይ ይሄንን አሶሲዬሽን ድሮ ማድረግ ይፈልጋሉና እንደምታውቁት በአማራ ክልል ላይ በነበረው ጦርነት ፋኖ የመንግስት አላይ ሆኖ አይደለም ያንን ጦርነት ያደረገው የአማራን ህዝብ ዲፌንድ ለማድረግ ነው የመጀመሪያው ጦርነት ላይ ሲሳተፍ የነበረው እንጂ ከአብይ ጋር ተባባሪ ስለነበረ አይደለም። አሁንም ፋኖ እያደረገ ያለው በአማራ ህዝብ ላይ ታወጀውን ጦርነት ለመቀልበስ ነው ጥረት እያደረገ ያለውና so the international media continuously ይሄንን ፋኖን አላይ ያደርጋሉ they associate the fanos with the government እና particularly in the previous war እና so they consider the current fanos resistance as the shift in alliance. So what efforts do you guys make in making to reshape the narrative and promote an accurate understanding of the situation? ችላ ማለት ነው። Thank you.
አመሰግናለሁ። አይ ቲንክ ሌላ ስለማይታየኝ እነዚህን መልስና እንዘጋለን። ምናልባት የሬትን ጥያቄ ጀምሬ ስለነበረ ልንጨርሰውና በትንግርቱ ጥያቄ ላይ I'll let Ted and Robert respond to ትንግርት's comment question. መምህራን ግድያ በተመለከተ በእኛ በኩል ይህንን ሪፖርት ስናጠቃልል ከዛ በኋላ የተፈጸመ ኢንሲደንት ነው። ኢንፋክት በተጨባጭ የተፈጠረው ምንድን ነው የሚለውን ከተለያዩ ሚዲያዎች ሞኒተር ለማድረግ ሞክረናል። አንዳንድ ሚዲያዎች ላይ የፋኖ አመራሮች የሰጡትን መልስ አይተናል። በመንግስት ሚዲያዎችም የተባለውን ሰምተናል። ነገር ግን በተጨባጭ መሬት ላይ ያለውን ሁኔታ ማጣራት አሳይመንት ተሰጥቷቸው የኛ ኢንቨስቲጌተሮች ስራ እየሰሩ ነው። ነገር ግን የኛው ሪፖርት ከተጠናከረ ቆይቷል። ያው በማንኛውም ሪፖርት እንደሚወስደው ጊዜ ወይም ሂደት አንጻር ኢንቨስቲጌት አድርገን ከጨረስን ወራቶች ተቆጥረዋል። በጃንዋሪ 2025 ነው የመጨረሻውን ዴታ የወሰድነው። ምናልባት እሱን በሪፖርቱ ግልጽ ካላደረግነው አይ ቲንክ ሜቢ እሱን ግልጽ ማድረግ ኖርብን ይችላል። ከዛ በኋላ የተፈጠሩ
ይቅርታ ሆነ አቋረጥኩ። የመራዊውን እንደ ምሳሌ ነው የጠቀስኩት። ሪፖርቱ ከተዘጋጀ በኋላ በመሆኑ እንደዚሁም ስላላጣራችሁ እንደሆነ ገልጸሃል። ግን ሌሎች መጥቀስ የሚቻሉ አሉ። ለምሳሌ ኢሰመኮ ራሱ ያወጣው አለ በስናን ወረዳ የተፈጸመ በመስከረም ወር ላይ ማለት ነው። ጌታ እንዳላንማው እንዲሁም አትንኩት ሁነኛው የተባሉ የሁለተኛ ደረጃ ትምህርት ቤት መምህራን በፋኖ መገደላቸውን የሚመለከትና እንደዚህም አይነት መረጃዎች ስላሉ የመራዊውን እንደ ምሳሌ ነው እንጂ የጠቀስኩት ሌሎችም አሉ ለማለት ነው።
መልካም። አይ ቲንክ እንደሱ አይነት ሪፖርቶች ካሉ ተመልሰን የምናያቸው ይሆናሉ። በአጠቃላይ በመርህ ደረጃ የትሪፕሌ ሪፖርቶች እውነታውን መዘገብና እዛ ላይ ማጉላት ነው የሚፈልጉት። ምናልባት በእኛ ኢንቨስቲጌተሮች የተለየ ያልተካተቱ ጉዳዮች ካሉ አሁን ያልሽውን ጥቆማ ወስደን እንደገና ተመልሰን የምናየው ነው የሚሆነው። በዋናነት ግን ይሄ ሪፖርት ሁሉንም ኢንሲደንቶች ከቨር እንዳላደረገ አሳይተናል። ዓላማውም እሱ አልነበረም። በፕሬዘንቴሽናችንም ላይ እንዳሳየ ነው ትሬንዱን ማሳየት ነው። ሲስተማቲክ የሆነ ሪከረንት የሆነ እና ሞቲቬትድ የሆኑ ጎሎችን ታርጌት አድርጎ ትምህርት ተቋማቶች ላይ የሚፈጸሙ ጥቃቶችን ነው ሪፖርቱ የሚያሳየው። ያ ማለት በተለያዩ ቦታዎች ላይ ሌሎች አይነት ኢንሲደንቶች አልነበሩም ማለት አልነበረም። በአገዛዙም ኃይሎች ፈጸማቸው ያልናቸው ጥቃት አይነቶች በሙሉ ሁሉን የሚያካትቱ ናቸው ማለት አልነበረም። በዚህ ሪፖርት ላይ ማሳየት የተፈለገው አንደኛ ከኢንቴንት ጋር ተያይዞ ትምህርት ተቋማቶችን በቋሚነት ማውደም እና ስርዓቱን ማዳከም ላይ የተመሰረቱ መሆናቸውን፣ ሁለተኛ ጥቃቱ በተደጋጋሚ ሪከረንት መሆኑን እና እሱም ደግሞ በተደጋጋሚ ባህሪ የሆነ የራሱ ባህሪ ያለው መልክ እንዳለው ለማሳየት እና ከዓለም አቀፍ ሕግ የወንጀለኝነትን ኢምፕሌይ የሚያደርግ ፓተርንን ማሳየት አስቦ የቀረበ ነው። ከዛ ውጭ በሁለቱም ወገኖች የተዘለሉ ኢንሲደንቶች ሊኖሩ እንደሚችሉ ታሳቢ እናደርጋለን። ምናልባት አንቺ እንደምታስቢው በፋኖ ኃይሎችም ሪከረንት የሆነ ተደጋጋሚ ፖለቲካ ግብን ይዞ የሚፈጸም የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት አለ ተብሎ የሚታሰብ ከሆነ ጥቆማውን ወስደን በዛ አግባብ መዳኘት ያለባቸው ወይም መከለስ ያለባቸው ጥናቶች ካሉ እንዲሁም ደግሞ ራሱን የቻለ ለዚሁ ቶፒክ ላይ ለዚሁ አሊጌሽን ላይ የተመሰረተ ሪፖርት የሚያስፈልግ ከሆነ የምናየው ነው የሚሆነው። ነገር ግን የተዘለሉ ካሉ ምክንያታቸው ሪፖርቱ ሙሉ በሙሉ ሁሉንም ኢንሲደንቶች ከበር ስላላደረገ ወይም ደግሞ ማሳየት ከተፈለገው ሪከረንት ፓተርን እና ሞቲቬሽን አንጻር ፊት የማያደርግ ሆኖ እንደሆነ እንዲታሰብ እንፈልጋለን። ከዛ ባለፈ ግን በየትኛውም ወገን የሚፈጸም የሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት መወገዝ መቻል አለበት። የትምህርት ተቋማቶች ከጦርነት አውድማ መሆን የለባቸውም። ለማንኛውም በፋኖ ኃይሎችም ቢሆን የአማራን ሕዝብ ጥቅም ለማስከበር የሚንቀሳቀሱ እስከመሆናቸው ድረስ ይህንን ማድረግ አስፈላጊና ጠቀሜታ አለው ብለን አናምንም። ስለዚህ በዚህ አግባብ ተፈላጊ ጥቆማዎች ከመጡ አስፈላጊውን ማጣራት አድርገን የምንገልጽ ነው የሚሆነው። አይ ቲንክ እንደ ሚዲያም ፓርትነር መሆን እንችላለን። በዚህ ዙሪያ የእናንተ በእኛ በኩል ያልመጡ በእናንተ በተደጋጋሚ አሁን የጠቀሻቸውን ጨምሮ ሌሎችም ካሉ እነሱን ወስደን ተጨማሪ ምርመራ አድርገን እንደ አስፈላጊነቱ ማስተናገድ የምንችልበት አግባብ ይኖራል። ይህንን ካልኩኝ አይ ቲንክ Ted and Robert, maybe you can comment on the narrative about Fano versus PP, particularly in relation to Northern Ethiopia.
Ted, would you like to? Sure. So thank you for the questions, Riot and Tingertu. To address Tingertu's last question, I think the notion that Fano were allied with government forces is not something that we necessarily regurgitated in our articulations of what happened. We do our best to consult diverse sources and follow developments closely. So for example, a lot of our media appearances around that time, especially in 2023 when the war started, we actually addressed this point, and a lot of it was around just kind of clarifying that during the Northern Ethiopia War, the Fano and the Amhara forces were fighting in self-defense because the region was invaded by a number of forces, on the north by TPLF, from the east and the south from the AAA, from the west by the Sudan army. And so these things prompted a self-defense response. Fanos and actually the Amhara people at large had actually staged anti-government protests dating back to 2016, but notable ones in 2021, 2022 to 2023. This is something that we have talked about on our platforms, in interviews, and even through op-eds. So we've really tried to inform the narrative and correct certain like misconceptions, just because there have been some misconceptions or preconceived ideas that have been like propelled forward. But I think we have actually been able to successfully influence the mainstream narrative. For example, around the Pretoria deal, the idea that the Amhara representatives, or the Amhara community rather, was essentially excluded from this deal that was non-transparent and had many faults that we believed would not make it successful in bringing peace, or rather at least lasting peace in the region. And so we've made this very clear. We actually did do multiple international press briefings, connecting international journalists and researchers with Amhara leaders on the ground, including Fano leaders. And so this was important for getting a different perspective, especially for a lot of these journalists, which previously did not incorporate their perspectives into stories about Amhara. So again, AAA's mission is to ensure that Amhara people can take ownership of their stories, of these narratives, and have a seat at the table, essentially, because a lot of the times we had these concerns of discussions happening about us without us. And so that, we believe, has to be something that's challenged, and we've done our best to challenge that. And again, if our partners in media or elsewhere have ideas for angles that haven't been explored, for things that haven't been tried, we're happy to engage with all of you and to see where we can improve, where we can make corrections if necessary, or where we can pursue new ideas.
Yeah, just to follow up with on what Robil said, Tingritu, sometimes there's a laziness with non-Ethiopian medias when they're writing a story about Ethiopia, because they're not necessarily experts. And so there's like a copy paste almost of like certain narratives, not understanding the impact of it. And as Robil has said, like we've appeared on, I remember like I was on Al Jazeera like right after the war started in a debate, and I addressed this issue from the get-go, that the reason that the Amharas and Fanos were not partners of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed when they were just literally protesting against Abiy Ahmed to be held accountable within the International Criminal Court. But the reason that they were fighting against the TPLF is because of the literal invasion of the Amhara region by the TPLF. So it was self-defense. So we've tried to address this many times. What happens sometimes is like when there's a new Western journalist that comes in and is covering Ethiopia, and we have not had a chance to brief them, or we might have briefed them but not had thought about this issue, then it's like a copy and paste. But I think we've successfully really changed the narratives on a lot of issues. When Robil was talking about Pretoria, it's now widely accepted that the Pretoria Agreement was a failure because Amharas were excluded. So if you look at now what like many Western analysts, they'll say that the Pretoria Agreement has failed. And many of them will say, yes, Amharas were excluded. And if they were part of the process, you would not have this war. Even diplomats that we have spoken to have come to that conclusion as well, that there was an exclusion of Amharas, when the initial narrative was Amharas are represented by the federal government. And so there's a lot of narratives that we have gone after, that we have challenged and have been successful in. Sometimes some narratives, it takes a little bit of time when, to completely remove from the mainstream, but we're going to continue to work on that. With that said, I really, want to thank each and every one of you for attending today's media briefing. We hope that you continue to give these issues that are facing the Amhara people and broadly Ethiopia coverage. This is, something, very, very, very serious, especially when we talk about children and the long-term impact that it will have on a community the size of the Amhara community. And so if you have any, questions after this media briefing, we're more than happy, to respond and try to address any questions that you might have. But, please give this report attention. The reports that we put out almost on a daily basis on our AAA account are also on the Amhara War Updated account on X. And again, if you have any questions about those what we put out there, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If there are also any other issues that you think that AAA should be looking at, investigating, please share those with us as well, and we're happy to try to follow up. Thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.